Hello, and welcome to another episode of Archives and Anchovies, the podcast about whatever it is I feel like talking about that week. This has been an unusual week because I was doing some traveling and last week was not able to record an episode, so had to skip a week, but this episode has actually been almost a month in the making. I was talking to my mother-in-law at a family gathering, and the subject somehow got on the topic of iron lungs. You know how conversations go. We just started talking about certain things, and my daughter was talking about a movie that was named Iron Lung, and as things went along, she started telling me about the polio epidemics of the 1950s, and the iron lung was this giant machine that basically helped people breathe where their lungs got paralyzed from the polio. And so there was terrified parents every summer. The kids would be playing one day and they would be paralyzed the next. It was very, very frightening. And one of the other things that we talked about during that course of that evening was classical music. We both have had a long-standing history of talking about classical music, sharing classical music. And when we started talking about polio, it got me thinking about Itzhak Perlman, because this is a 4-year-old kid that in Israel in 1949, he contracted polio and he lost the use of his legs. And you know what? This kid then goes on to become arguably the greatest violinist of our time. Today, we're talking about two virtuosos who took very different paths, but share something essential. They're both absolute masters of their craft who chose joy over bitterness. They chose humor over pretension, and they both made the world a little bit better through their music. One of them overcame polio to redefine classical violin, and the other, well, he made a polka medley out of Nirvana songs. Again, I'm James Coulon, and this is Archives and Anchovies. So we're going to start in the summer of 1949. We're in Israel, and Israel at this point was barely a year old as a nation, the new Israel. And Itzhak Perlman was 4 years old and living in Tel Aviv. And like thousands of kids that year, he contracted polio. Now, to understand what this means, you have to understand the sheer terror of polio in the mid-20th century. In America alone, in 1952, the epidemic infected nearly 58,000 people. Most of those were children. Public pools, they completely closed. Parents kept kids inside during summer. And hospitals, they filled with those iron lungs that I was just talking about. They're terrifying metal cylinders that breathed for the patients whose chest muscles had been paralyzed. Very, very frightening. The polio virus attacks the nervous system, and in some severe cases, it causes paralysis, and sometimes it's temporary, but sometimes it's permanent, and in a lot of cases, it was fatal. In Itzhak Perlman's case, it left him unable to walk without crutches. He was only 4 years old. So, now, the story could have gone one way, but it really did go a completely other way. Perlman's parents, well, they noticed that he was an extraordinary talent and he had an extraordinary ear for music. He'd hear something, whether it be on the radio or played, and he could replicate it with no problem. So when he was 5, just a year after his polio diagnosis and it hit him, they took him to the Shmolet Conservatory in Tel Aviv to study violin. But guess what? Itzhak Perlman was rejected. He was too small. They said he was too young. And let's be honest, at that time, they probably did it because of the crutches. But his parents didn't give up. So his parents found him a private teacher. And Perlman, he fell in love with the violin. The thing is, most solo violinists, when you go to a concert and you see them stand and they're doing concertos, a Beethoven concerto, Tchaikovsky concerto, they stand to perform those. The posture and the stance, it's all part of the traditional technique. Well, Perlman, he couldn't do that. So you know what he did? He adapted. He learned to play sitting down, and he learned so thoroughly that it became his signature. Of course, other people in the orchestra do sit down to play, but very unusual for a soloist. He didn't make the violin adapt to traditional standards. He made his technique so undeniable that the world adapted to him. And by age 13, he appeared on American television on the Ed Sullivan Show. By 13 years old. By his 20s, He was performing at Carnegie Hall, and over his career, he has won a total of 15 Grammy Awards, a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, 4 Emmy Awards, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But here's what I maybe find most remarkable about Itzhak Perlman. It's not just his music. It's what he's done beyond the music. Mr. Perlman has spent decades fighting for disability rights and accessibility. And he doesn't do it quietly. He's very vocal about this. He's also very persistent about this. He's used his fame to leverage actual change. Here's a quote from him that I love. He said, "This is not charity work. We have to have a way of life so we don't have to worry about what, if anything, is accessible. I want to be able to go to a concert and know I can get there, and I don't want to have to call ahead." Think about that for just a second. Itzhak Perlman, one of the world's greatest musicians, someone who's performed at Lincoln Center and Carnegie Hall hundreds of times, he still has to call ahead at this point in time to make sure he can get into the building, or he can get onto the stage if he's performing, or just even into the bathroom. In 2016, when he won the Genesis Prize, sometimes called the Jewish Nobel, he used the $1 Million Award to fund programs integrating people with disabilities into Israeli and American society. Not as an afterthought, but as full participants. He's worked with Israeli Knesset to strengthen the disability rights legislation. He's pushed American concert halls to install ramps and accessible seating. He mentored young musicians with disabilities, showing them that, yes, you know what? You can have a career in music. You can have this career. And he's done all of this while maintaining a tremendous sense of humor about it. In one concert review, a critic mentioned that when a violin string broke during a performance, Perlman, he didn't panic. He didn't apologize. He didn't just give up. He did stand-up comedy, just entertain the audience with jokes while the string got fixed. That's the one thing about Perlman that maybe some people don't know. He never let the polio define him, but he also never pretended it wasn't part of his reality. He just refused to let the world's lack of accessibility be his problem to solve quietly. And he also made it everyone else's problem, and then he helped everyone fix it. The polio vaccine, by the way, Jonas Salk announced it in 1955, just 6 years after Perlman contracted the disease. It's estimated to have prevented millions of cases of paralysis and death. My mother-in-law remembered the relief and the celebrations that kids were allowed to go back to swimming pools and they were allowed to go outside. And when we talk about Itzhak Perlman, he kind of represents both sides of that history, both the cost of the disease and his determination to make sure the world works better for everyone who comes after, whether they're paralyzed from that disease or not. Okay. Deep breath, that got pretty heavy. So we're going to shift gears, because if Itzhak Perlman represents classical virtuosity and advocacy through persistence, well, Weird Al Yankovic represents a different kind of mastery altogether, the mastery of the polka medley, the mastery of perfectly styled Jerry curls in the 80s, and the mastery of convincing Michael Jackson, the greatest pop star to ever live, that there should be a frame-by-frame parody of the massive hit Beat It with the title Eat It. And yes, I am arguing that Weird Al belongs in the same episode as Itzhak Perlman because they share something essential. They both are world-class musicians that never let the virtuosity become joyless. Alfred Matthew Yankovic was born in 1955 in Downey, California. His parents, Nick and Mary Yankovic, decided their 7-year-old should learn the accordion. Itzhak Perlman learned the violin, kind of a sexy instrument. Weird Al Yankovic got to choose the accordion. In 1966, right as rock and roll was exploding. Do you think that was something he wanted to do? Most kids probably would have rebelled. But you know what? Weird Al, he leaned in. He took lessons. He got really good. And then he got really good. He was classically trained and practiced obsessively. And by the time he was a teenager, he wasn't just competent. He could shred on that thing. In 1976, when he was only 16 years old, Al recorded his first parody, Belvedere Cruising, a riff on Surfin' Safari about his family station wagon. He sent that to one of my favorite DJs at the time when I was growing up in the 80s, Dr. Demento. He had a radio show, and Demento, he actually played it. And you know what? People loved it. And Al realized, wait, this could be a thing, or this could be my thing. And here's what I love about Weird Al's career. He's been doing this since 1976. So that's almost 50 years. 50 years of polka medleys and costume changes and staying culturally relevant through disco, through new wave, hair metal, grunge, hip hop, and whatever we're calling music today. He himself has won 5 Grammys. He's won 5 Grammys. He's had 4 gold albums and 6 platinum albums. His 2014 album, Mandatory Fun, was the first comedy album to debut at #1 on the Billboard 200 in over 50 years. And he's done it all while being, by every account that I could find, genuinely one of the nicest people in the music industry. Here's the thing about parody as well. Legally, Al doesn't have to ask permission. Parody is a protected class, but he always asks anyway because he wants the artist to be in on the joke. For instance, there's a famous one by Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney is a vegetarian, and when Al wanted to do a parody of Live and Let Die that was called Chicken Pot Pie, Paul McCartney didn't like that very much. He wanted it to be something that was not concerned with meat. But you know what Al did? He respected that, and he chose a different song instead. When Coolio initially said he wasn't happy about Amish Paradise, Al apologized publicly, even though he'd gotten approval through Coolio's label. And you know what? They made up years later. Michael Jackson, again, as I was saying, personally approved Eat It and also Fat and loved them both. Prince, however, consistently said no to parodies, and Al respected that as well. And then Lady Gaga, her manager initially declined Perform This Way, then Gaga herself overruled him and said yes. So, can we talk about these polka medleys for a second? As I mentioned, Al has made 5 Grammy-nominated polka medleys. He's taken Nirvana, 9 Inch Nails, the Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, and Green Day, and turned them into accordion-driven polkas. You need to check these out. It's great music. Polka Your Eyes Out includes Foo Fighters and Daft Punk. The man turned Smells Like Teen Spirit into a polka, probably and arguably Nirvana's greatest hit. And somehow it works. The accordion skills that he has are legitimate, by the way. He can play lightning fast, he can play beautifully and creatively, and he can mimic any genre. He just chooses to use those powers for parody. And let's not forget about those crazy costumes. The fat suit for Fat, the Amish beard, the entire White and Nerdy video where he's doing perfect choreography in front of a green screen, the Jerry curl and mustache phase that defined the 80s. He commits not 50%, he commits completely to the bit every single time. And here's why I think Weird Al and Itzhak Perlman belong in this same conversation. They're both virtuosos. Genuinely, they're world class at their instruments. And they both chose joy. Perlman, he could have been very bitter. Instead, he's warm and funny and fights to make the world more accessible and a much better place. Al, he could have gone the cynical route with parody. Instead, he's earnest and kind and makes people genuinely laugh and genuinely happy, which is something that today is sometimes sorely missed. They both persevered in incredibly difficult fields. Classical violin and comedy music are not easy careers. There's lots and lots of people that do them, and they both understood something that was critically essential. Technical mastery is only meaningful if it connects with people emotionally. I'm going to say that again. Technical mastery is only meaningful if it connects with people emotionally. They both understood that at a very intrinsic level. Perlman advocating for disability rights isn't just impressive activism, it's inspiring. And Weird Al's polka medleys aren't just musically clever, they're just plain fun. You get to enjoy them and have joy. So that's it. We talked about 2 virtuosos today. One classical, one comedic. Both absolute masters who made the world better through not only their music, but their humanity. If you want to dive deeper, I'll have some links in the show notes. You can go look up Perlman's Genesis Prize acceptance speech. It's pretty powerful, and you can pretty much find Weird Al's entire catalog anywhere music exists on any streaming service. Next week, we're probably talking about something that happens to me this week, but I just want to let you know that I appreciate you listening. If you enjoy this content, share it with somebody. Give me a thumbs up. Make a comment. Let me know what things I may have missed that you may have wanted to cover or any topics that I might want to cover. Until then, remember, mastery isn't just about perfecting your craft. It's about using that craft to make the world a little bit better. Once again, I'm your host, James Coulon, for Archives and Anchovies. And as always, I wish you a great afternoon, a wonderful evening, and a fantastic week ahead. Thank you.